Hey everybody, welcome. Pinecone Studios Testimony House, new John Simmons here with my man Tim Needham, founder of Restoration House. Man, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Man, this is exciting. I haven't talked to you in a minute on the air here at Testimony House because for those who don't know, we used to have a radio show in STL. We started that in 2016, I believe, and you were one of the first guests that rolled through.
I didn't know that.
You had just founded your ministry at the
Yeah.
time. And that's how we got to know each other. We got connected through a mutual friend, Kurt, who's been on the show many times.
Yeah,
And that was the first time we met. Do you remember that?
I do. We were little babies back then.
Yes.
Baby ministries and baby organizations, baby radio shows. And
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing you. I was like, man, this guy's tall. And then the name of your organization, Restoration House, Testimony House. I was like, oh, we're gonna be fast friends. This is
We both got houses.
yes, we have Bill in the house. We got a whole subdivision now.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So that was really cool. I'd really love for you to tell people. It's been a minute, man.
Yeah.
Tell them about Restoration House. How you got started with that.
Yeah. Okay. How we got started? Well, we got started because in 2008, I was a full-time youth pastor, and I was in youth ministry, loved it, loved every minute of it. Did that for 4 years and had to abruptly step away from that because there were some things going on in the church the lead pastor was doing that were not good things. And I know, like, people have stories like that sometimes where they say, like, there were some things that were not going on. This was really bad, though. Like, this was, like, cataclysmic. He's in prison for the rest of his life, kind of bad things. And that's true. Like, he's actually in prison now for the rest of his life. So I kind of became aware of some of those things that were going on, not all of them, and had to abruptly leave that position. And I loved it. And I spent a season lost, like had no idea what I was going to do next.
Can I ask you before you move on to sort of how you got into Restoration House from there?
Yeah.
Because I have this huge question in my heart as we watch all like the scandals and like the pastors who come under fire, and clearly you're under attack at any level of ministry, whether you're a known person or not.
Mm-hmm.
But these guys come under heavy attack. A church gets fractured. Sometimes a leader might have to lead or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What does it do to you? Because I have not been in this situation. I can only speculate in my mind what that's like, right? So for you, when you're going through this and you see the results of it now, what does that do to your faith? Does it rock you to think, I'm not going back to church? Or does that have nothing to do with your relationship with God or what?
It really put me in a tailspin for a long time. I didn't question my faith or anything at that time. Ironically, it was years later where I had an issue like questioning my faith. But at that time, no, it just questioned like the church for me. Like, okay, is this what it's going to be like everywhere? But still felt the need to be in church. So I ironically began pursuing youth ministry opportunities immediatee. So I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and it's what had been on my heart for years. And so to answer your question, though, it really fractured me. I had major trust issues with people after that, because part of it wasn't just what the things he was doing were the problem. It was the response from other people. So this church that we were at, I didn't know them my whole life, but my wife did. And many of them like just left.
Yeah.
And there were no phone calls like to see how we were doing, no check-ins, say, hey, we love you. And we were told, like, I confronted the pastor and I said, I can see what's going on and I can't get down with this. And he said, you got to get down with what we're doing or else. And so I picked that or else option. I told him, I said, I'm taking that or else option. When I did that, the response was, don't come back. There was one elder who took the time to meet with me and check in with me, and he's still a great close friend of ours to this day, and he's been such a great support. Everybody else was pretty much like, see you later.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
So trust issues were
Certainly
a big thing after that. Yeah.
But
so
it led you kept going though. You didn't lose your faith in the sense that you wanted to stop going to church. You were like, I'm still going to be a youth pastor, just not here.
yeah, and everywhere I tried, I couldn't I couldn't get in. Like every door that I tried to get into, they shut over and over and over again. And so there's this season, like about 2 years, where I was just like, what the heck, God? Like, I want to do this.
Right.
And no opportunities are popping up. Every time I think an opportunity happens, like it gets shut. And so I'm in this wilderness, like time in my life, like, what the heck am I called to do? Because this is not happening. And so in that 2-year period, I got a job at Epworth Children and Family Services, working in their street outreach program. So it was still working with young people, but was not, I wasn't, doing youth ministry, wasn't spiritually working in their lives. Mm-hmm. So it really killed me that like I'm doing all this work with these young people, and I'm not even allowed to have a conversation about spiritual matters with them, about their faith and what does God have a plan, for them in their life. So during that time, I was like, man, they do a lot of really cool stuff here, but they're missing the mark. They're missing what I think is the most important part, which is their identity and their eternal identity. And so I met with one other person. Her name's Lily Blake, who is the other co-founder of Restoration House now. And, we kind of just, during that time, we held each other up when we felt like we were in the lion's den working at this organization where we're not allowed to talk about religion and faith and everything. So her and I began talking like, if we could just do this our own way, like, what would this look like? Like, well, we would do this, this, and this. But at the core of all of that would be Jesus.
Yeah.
If we could just, in everything that we do, put Jesus at the center, and all the other things we can't do, we're actually going to connect him to organizations like Epworth and all this, but still keep Jesus the same. So I was there for like 3.5, almost 4 years, fleshing some of that out, like just what it would look like. And I got the opportunity from somebody early on who said, I'd like to put some skin in this to help you launch this nonprofit. And then it became very real. It's like, oh, wait, this is just an idea. No, I'm not actually serious about this.
It's a lot more fun to talk about what you might do versus actually having to do the thing by faith.
Well, really, it was just complaining sessions. Man, these people don't do this. They need to be doing this over here, Yeah. And so then all of a sudden it became real, like, oh, shoot, like God's actually testing me on this. Like, do I have the faith to actually get this going? And so we did. Back in 2015 was what we spent about a year just doing some R&D on it. Like, okay, what do we want? None of us were getting paid for this. We were just trying to formulate ideas. And so in 2016 was when it actually became a reality. We started working on leadership development, outreach programs, and got it going from there. So
the idea of helping youth stems from your idea you want to be a pastor. I love that God is so often like marching us towards our end result without us even knowing. That Joseph season, right? You're in a well, you don't know that being in prison and going to Egypt is actually going to lift you up to a place, and so there's often those stories in the Bible. Just for us personally, in the moment though, those moments feel so terrible.
I hate it.
like you have to get broken from a church, have to go look unsuccessfully for another youth pastor job. So but God's like, don't worry, Tim, I'm setting you up for something. You can't see it, but it's on the way.
Yeah.
So when you get set up for youth ministry and God's given you this vision in your heart, even though you said maybe you started from complaining sessions, I love the idea that you guys saw something, a need, and you wanted to fill it. Because that's ultimately when God calls us to serve, like we're to serve a people group or to serve at a particular place or particular opportunity, and that's what he's done for you. And so he's given you this heart for young people. So tell me what exactly what you guys started doing in the very beginning.
Yeah.
Because I know it's probably changed since then.
Yeah, so a lot has changed, but ironically, the very first thing that we did, we still continue to do today. I'm a big believer in, like, I don't want to reinvent the wheel with, like, programs. God has given me an ability to start things in my life. I know that that's what I'm good at, but what's the simplest and easiest thing that you can do to get some kind of movement going? And I said, well, I'm really good at like outreach. I'm really good at like just hitting the streets, like literally hitting the streets with people and just striking up a conversation.
Can I just
Yeah.
can I tell you that's just like the most scariest thing is for somebody even like me who is like I'm an all in on Jesus type of guy. I have been since I got saved. Like I am willing to dig holes and climb mountains if I'm asked to.
Yeah.
But when it goes to like doing mission work, and even that's mission work because even though it's local, it's like going in the mission field like that. I think I really do believe this. There is a particular grace in calling for anything that God asks you to do, but specifically for people who are willing to get on the streets, work with people who are going to probably reject them. They're going to need help, but they may not want the help you're giving.
Yeah.
And they might want a different kind of help, and you're not going to give them that kind of, like, there's a lot of different nuances to that sort of work. But it really, just the idea of it, like, making my stomach turn at the thought of just going to, like, tonight I'm going to just approach 50 strangers.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you about that. Let me tell you my very first experience in that. So this is before Restoration House. I'm a youth pastor in these days. And so my wife's uncle, Jeff, he'd been working with the homeless for a couple of years. And he kept inviting me to come down. And at this point in my life, I never worked with homeless people, never worked in street outreach, never done any of it. I had a very vanilla kind of life, up to that point.
Yeah.
So he just keeps bugging me and pushing me. And I'm like, fine, okay. One day I just do it. And so in my head, I'm thinking, all right, we're about to do street outreach with homeless people. So I'm leaving my phone at home. I'm leaving my wallet at home because I'm not getting into one of these situations where somebody's going to take all my money and my phone. That's the mentality I had going down there. We get out of the van, and the first person I see is this. So there's a lot of stereotypes I'm about to like unleash, So a very long, dark-skinned, dreads, like really long trench coat, face covered, like in my mind, scary looking dude that we come across first. And that doesn't make it scary enough. He's holding a rifle in his hand when we come up to him. And so
Excuse me, sir.
So Jeff is like, he's like, come on. I'm like, come in, what do you mean, come on? Like, come on to what? That guy?
Right.
That's who we're going to go? Yeah. No. Yeah. But he makes me walk over to him. And so his name is Dante, right? And so begin talking to Dante, and honestly, like, I'd love to like say that it was really scary, but after that moment, such a sweet guy, such a tender-hearted guy. He was homeless, but very tender-hearted, sweet man that I learned when you first meet him, he goes by Dante, but the people that he really loves and trusts, his real name is Laban. So Laban became my very first homeless friend on the streets. And so when I tell this story to people, usually they're sitting there listening to me share this story, and they're like, okay, yeah, but what about the gun?
Sure.
And so it turns out he was actually on the riverfront shooting small squirrels to like literally skin and cook for food. So I was a youth pastor at that time. And I wanting to get my kids involved in like service projects, decide to bring them, the youth group, down. They come down, they get out of the van, and sure enough, Dante's the first person they meet again. But this time he's got a machete in his hand. And so my kids are doing the same thing. Like, wait, we're going to see that guy. Yup, we're going to see that guy. So they again immediately fell in love with him. He's such a tender-hearted guy. I know him to this day. Doesn't live here in St. Louis anymore, but the machete he was using to clear brush. It was the summertime, so there was overgrown brush everywhere, and they're just trying to eliminate all the mosquitoes and stuff. So he was literally down there clearing the brush from the land
with his back cave of weapons that he has.
Yeah. So I tell you that because I say that like everybody has that scared mindset, like, I'm not going to do that.
Sure.
That sounds like a really stupid idea. But I learned with Restoration House, it's such an easy way for us to get involved. It doesn't cost us any money to go out and just start praying with people and loving on them right there. Maybe give them like a taco or some food or something, like a tangible good that can bless them a little bit, but it doesn't cost us much to do that. So that's the very first program that we got going. And it's also still the one that we we have running to this day. It's all volunteer led. All of our folks who come down are volunteers, people within different churches in St. Louis, and we go out every Tuesday, and we just love on people.
Yeah, it's an incredible program, man. Especially now, 8 or 9 or 10 years later, however long it's almost 10 years. Since
Almost 10 years, yeah.
And getting started in that way, in that method, where welcome to the team,
right? But see, like everybody has that mindset when they come down. It's like, oh crap. So what I tell people now is like when they're coming down for the first time, they think that our primary objective is serving the homeless that night. It is not, and it has not been our primary objective for a long time. My primary objective is that volunteer. So the mindset that you just expressed, I'm trying to change that mindset.
Okay.
That, hey, not everybody who is homeless and in these dire straits are dangerous people, or I don't have to feel a certain way. The truth is, like, they are just as much of God's people as anybody else that I come in contact with, and all they want more than anything is just somebody to listen to them. They want to be heard. They want to feel like, they don't want to feel like the black sheep of society. Yeah. They want to know that somebody, when we come down there, that we're going to listen to them, that we're going to talk about the Cardinals or, the Blues, or just a normal conversation. We're not going to try to come down and fix them per se. We're just going to meet them where they're at. We're going to love on them. And what it has done through the years is we've spent so much time with many of them. When we go on Tuesday nights now, there's some people that we have seen for almost 8 or 9 years. They so look forward to seeing us. And if we come down now and we don't have a prayer circle before we leave, like they're furious. Like, hey, come on. Get your butts. You're not leaving yet. We haven't had our prayer time. We haven't spent that time in prayer. Before y'all go, that's what we're going to do. We're not saying that. Yeah. They're saying that, So
what is the response? So you say, like, to change it from I'm focused on not serving necessarily the homeless, but serving the volunteer. You're just trying to get their heart to see differently?
Yeah. I'm trying to get them to see that, like, look, you may think that person on the street is the whole problem. I'm trying to get you to see that's part of the problem, but the other part is maybe a little bit of your heart as well.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that judgmentally. I had that same thing too.
Yeah.
I left my wallet and my car and my phone at my house the very first time I went, and
not worried about if you get in trouble and you can't call for help.
Right. So I want to help you. I want to help those people who are coming down to change their mindset, to pull the scales off their eyes a little bit and see, like, hey, you know what? Like, these people are just like me and you. And many of them are often we're just one bad decision away from being in the same position that they are.
I want to talk about sort of the idea of homelessness in general. Like, you work with homeless youth, which is, I bet you a lot of people don't understand that's a huge problem, right?
Yeah.
They just think, when you think of homelessness, you think of like just adult and mental illness, and you think maybe you have some stereotypes of your own that you lay on that homelessness issue. There's been a lot of conversation, discourse over the last few years around homelessness in different cities that sort of overrun it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you just have an overarching idea or thought, since you're in that space, as to what's our Christian response to this? How do we handle these problems? Obviously, you don't have the solutions for everything, but just from our faith-based perspective, what are some things we should be praying for, thinking about?
Well, I think that we need to be, the reason why we do 18 and 26-year-olds for our organization, that's the age range that we serve, is because we looked at studies and data, and it all demonstrated that the 18 and 26 was the most critical age range that determined future outcomes. So people who have like co-occurring disorders, drug addictions, alcohol addictions, and that ultimately end up on the streets as a homeless individual in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, they find that 18 and 26 was the most critical time, and that was going to be the determining factor as to whether they would end up chronically homeless and on the streets. And so we are trying to end that chronic homelessness where like they feel like the only option that they have is being on the streets. Or some, I mentioned that there are some people who we see on Tuesday Night Outreach that we've been working with for 10 years. Well, those are the people who are like 40 or 50 years old, and they're into that chronic state of homelessness. Like they can't imagine life any other kind of way. They're actually very content with where they're at.
Yeah, I've seen videos of homeless people who are like, someone will subsidize them an apartment or something. They're like, I don't want to live up there. I don't want to go in those places. And from the outside looking in, without any experience in that area, it seems like wild. What do you mean you don't want a place to live?
Yeah.
What do you mean you want to live in the street?
Have you ever seen the movie Shawshank Redemption?
Yes.
So that
Brooks.
Yeah.
Brooks goes up. Yeah.
He got institutionalized into being in prison, and he couldn't imagine living any other kind of way.
Go to the bathroom only when you were told to.
That's right. So when he gets his own apartment, he doesn't know what to do, and he like panics and he commits suicide because he doesn't know how to live any other kind of way.
Wow.
It's the exact same thing with people who are chronically homeless. We're trying to get them before they get so institutionalized that system. Homelessness people don't understand this, but it can be an addiction, just like alcohol and drugs. You can get addicted to being out on the streets. And it doesn't take that long. It can be as fast as 2 to 3 months where you get used to that. I mean, we think about it like it may not make sense to everybody, but the idea of not having any rules, not having anybody telling you what to do, not having any bills to pay, not having any kind of responsibility, can quickly shift into, that's how I want to live, And so we're trying to get in there before they get into that mindset.
Yeah. I was down in Atlanta a couple years ago. We did a testimonial video for a ministry down there that works in part with homelessness down in Atlanta, specifically around Athens, which is where University of Georgia, I think one of the big universities down there, may not be that one specifically, but one of the big colleges is down there. And there's a ton of homelessness in that area for who knows what reasons. I'm sure there's more than one, but they had one of these like giant tent cities, and we went down there and we see like all the needles and people are just like laying out on the streets. I've been to like our areas here in St. Louis where it's sort of like pushed back. You've really got to go into the city, the heart of it. Like the heart of St. Louis doesn't have a lot of population, and they're moving, further west. But here in this particular town, like the college kids are literally across the street at the bar, across the street from 200 homeless people, and it's sort of like a clash of communities, right? And I had never seen anything like that. While we were there, they had come and they like bulldozed the tent city. They were trying to get them out of there. And so they displaced a lot of these people, and so they're sort of like looking, and a lot of people are like laying at the streets of the shops and stuff themselves. And to me, it was just this like eye-opening moment where I was like, some of these people have been pushed out of their homes. They don't know where to go. It's so sad. Me as a Christian, like, and especially for the people we were highlighting in this video, which is also up on the channel, we'll link in the description, the idea that they want to help them and they can't, like, there's just a couple of them. And it's like they have all, and so for you guys, as you build your organization, you got to be thinking about finding people who have a heart for that. But one of the saddest things, Tim, that I saw, and you may have similar stories to this, is they took us to one of the government-run, like, places you can have homelessness. So for anybody who doesn't know, apparently like they'll bulldoze, the government will bulldoze the tent city because they don't want you in that area. But they'll say, this part of town, we'll go ahead and let you live over here if you can get over there. And so they took us to this place and they described it beforehand. It's like a gate. They have gates up and you can got to come in. There's even a security guard for the homeless city. And so I was like, what? That doesn't sound too bad. Like maybe it's a little safer or whatever else, And we get over there and they have it next to a slaughterhouse. I've never been to a slaughterhouse. This is my first. Oh, I didn't get to tour it. But do you know what a slaughterhouse smells like from just being on the outside of it?
I'm guessing disgusting.
It is one of the most wretched smells. I mean, worse. We live a few miles from a landfill. We drive by it occasionally. Worse than that, like by multiples. Like whatever was in the air at this plant or this facility was so disgusting and so gross. And this is where the government decides to put their homeless. This is what they think of them.
Wow.
And in that moment, it was worse than them having it gated up and a security guard. And like, I was just heartbroken to see that this is how the government. And so that's even one of the reasons I asked you the question is like, what's our heart? What's our prayer? Because my prayer is, please, Lord, get them away from the smell. First off,
Yeah.
I don't even know how to tackle the idea of just ending homelessness. Don't know if that ever happens.
Yeah.
But just how can we just be a little nicer and be like give some dignity to these people? Like you said, some of them are chronic homelessness. They don't want this other, and it's so hard for me to watch from a person who doesn't have their hands in it because I have no idea what to do.
Well, I mean, think about that person who's chronically homeless. We come at it when we see those individuals. We never try to assume anything. We just try to meet them where they're at. And if they want to, so I'm one of the guys that I have known for about 10 years. His name's Big John. And so John is probably never going to not be homeless. He's going to be on the streets for the rest of his life, most likely. I have to be okay with that.
Wow. Yeah, that's real.
I have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Doesn't change his eternal destiny. Doesn't change the fact that God still loves him. I have to be okay with the fact that he might just want to live his life a little bit differently than I do. Now, does that mean that I don't want to help 18 to 26-year-olds
Sure.
not get to that point? Yeah, no, I'm still going to try to go after them to help them pursue a life of purpose and passion. But I also see at the same time that John can still accomplish God's mission, God's plan, even though he's living his life in a different way than I do, just because he's living in a tent and not in an apartment.
Right. No, surely. Yeah. The idea.
Think about how John the Baptist lived.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. When Jesus healed, a blind man or healed a leper or healed these people, it's not like they had their whole life figured out the next day.
Yeah.
They still had to wake up and go, well, what now? I haven't worked for 35 years. I have no skill. I haven't even seen the world. Like, they're having to deal with all that. Not didn't get an apartment the next day, probably.
That's right.
But that part of the story isn't told.
Right. And we have to be okay with that. They're on their journey too, and just because somebody doesn't live in the same suburban neighborhood that I do, where I have a house and air conditioning and heat and electric and 2 cars with a little fence in the back, does not mean that I'm living my life any better according to God's standards than they are.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why an organization like ours does exist is because we do understand that being homeless does associate you with dangerous, more at-risk type of behaviors. That's why we don't want to. That's why we want to address the homeless problem. If people are homeless and that's just then that's okay. That's not the problem. The problem is the exposure to drugs, alcohol, and other forms of addictions that do tend to be much, much higher in homeless communities.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to address.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that in Athens. They had the way that it was described to me, and you may have something similar you can speak to, is like the idea of like these tiers of homelessness. So it's like you've got the homeless people that people don't mind being around. And so some of the shops will even let those people not necessarily loiter because they're not asking for nothing. They're just sort of sitting there.
Yeah.
And they don't look like someone who's hasn't had a house, because a lot of them are younger people from the college or whoever, that maybe they got into drugs or got into something. And then you've got sort of the mid tier and sort of like they'll walk around and ask for something every once in a while, but you won't see them too often. But then there's the third tier, the ones who lives in the tents, and they're on the street and they're just high as a kite and they're just laying there don't want no help, not asking for no help,
Sure.
but they're just like a nuisance in terms of visually to the image the city wants to portray to the rest of the world. And so when I think of people who go, oh, we'll just get a job. Well, then everybody just go get a job, homeless people, and get off the streets. That is not the solution to this.
And it's not, I have a lot of problems with statements like that, Most notably, one of the programs that our organization has now is an ID and birth certificate program now, where we if somebody comes into our facility, we have the ability to get them a birth certificate and ID, regardless of whether they have either one of those. So the problem is when you make a statement like that, or people make statements like, you need to go get a job. Let's flesh that out for a second.
Right.
So you apply for a job and you go get an interview, and the interview goes swimmingly, and they offer you the job, and you say, sweet, you're so excited. You were homeless before. Now you have an offer for a job. HR calls you and they say, okay, we're excited to get you started. All we need is a copy of your ID or your birth certificate. You don't have either one of those.
Right.
You go to the birth certificate office because you need the birth certificate first in order to get the ID. The birth certificate office, the state offices tell you, we would be happy to help you. All we need is a copy of your ID.
Right.
I don't have that. So like, all right. So
The bureaucracy at its best, right?
I'm going to go to the ID office. So you go to the ID office and they say, we would love to help you. All we need is a copy of your birth certificate. What?
What madness.
So you're in this circular, like, you cannot go anywhere, right? So this is a problem that has existed in our state, in states for decades. Is like somebody who wants to change their situation literally cannot. Until about like 15 years ago, there's a great organization here in town called the College of St. Francis Xavier, who found a way to bypass those loopholes and be grandfathered into some laws that allowed them to write a voucher to get a birth certificate. And then they could take that and then they get a voucher to go get their ID. But not only was it their voucher, but they would cover the cost of it as well. So I was aware of this organization for the last 15 years, but I also knew they were the only ones that could do it. And then we caught wind that they were going to like show some other organizations how to do this. And so when I being a very early young nonprofit entrepreneur who was looking for ways to raise money and increase our programs and our impact, I told my team, I'm like, we've got to be the second organization in the state of Missouri who can do that. And we've got to be the first ones that they can teach. They teach this to. And sure enough, we were the first that they taught, and we were the second nonprofit in the state of Missouri who had the ability to bypass this and get people access to their birth certificates and their IDs like on the spot. And it's been a game changer.
How I imagine. So you get this program, God puts favor on you, by the way. So when you walk in God's plan, even if it's not the youth pastor role you thought it was going to be, God shows favor and grace and mercy in areas where we maybe didn't know we'd have to walk, so that we can get to a result where at the end of the day, we see fruit from what we're doing. And what you're talking about is major fruit.
Major fruit, yeah.
So when you start to solve some of the issues for these homeless people who don't have ideas, and it's not just about going to get a job, it's just going to do life. Like,
That's right.
It's just anything you need is an ID. You need to get on a plane, whatever it is. You need some of this stuff. Tell me what it looks like in real life. So when you start getting some of these things handed out, what changes are you seeing? What moments are you experiencing?
Well, it's very small. The ID and birth certificate we consider a massive, huge, enormous win. Then it's weird. Like I can go out and get my ID and birth certificate right now, and like it's annoying to me.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Gotta go to these offices and gotta do this. But for us, with our people who we serve, it's a massive win. So I say that because the question you're asking is like, what's kind of next, and like how do you really gauge like movement? That movement is very, very, very slow. So to us, getting an ID and birth certificate is a massive win, and we celebrate it like that every time. So we take a picture with that person. That's good. We just want to like tell, we're so excited for you because you felt hopeless before. Now you have a little bit of hope. And so our hope is that we can move that needle of hope a little bit further every time you see us. So that, if you get a job working at like KFC, to me, I'd be like, oh, KFC. But to them, like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So the movement is very slow. And we have to celebrate even the smallest kind of wins. You know, did you have a good conversation with your boss? You know, where before you would have blown up at them.
Did you even show up for the interview? I imagine that's another thing. You know, whatever it is.
Are you on time for work?
Yes.
You know, and for us, I guess a big milestone is, can you hold a job consistently for more than 6 months? You know, there's one young lady on our programs right now who she's just been a rock star ever since we've known her. She's kind of becoming like my adopted daughter. I just love her to pieces. But she wanted to go into the type of work that we're doing, and we were a young enough organization. We didn't have the capacity to hire her, but we found a great place for her to go work. And so the pay wasn't that great, but I said, look, if you just start here, you know, at rock bottom, at the bottom in the organization, and you just hunker down, I promise you opportunities will arise. And so maybe it'll be within that organization. It's another nonprofit, but maybe it'll be someplace else. But what you need to do is just focus on staying there for at least a year.
Yeah.
And so she's now been there for a year. She's going on the 2-year mark.
Wow.
And so I've been having a few conversations with her recently. I'm like, I'm just telling you, things are coming.
Yeah.
Like, things are coming. You have done the hard work. You stayed, even when there were days where you wanted to quit and you're just super frustrated. You stayed the course, and that can be the hardest part right there, is when you're frustrated and you're like, I don't need this. I'm gonna quit. She stayed the course, and I think good things are really headed her way. So
it mirrors my own walk for sure, what you're describing. But I think so many of us, like, we just started talking about how, like, when God reveals purpose to you, or when God gets you on a plane, because that's part of your end goal here, is not just to get them to stop being homeless, but to understand God's purpose for their life, a plan for their life, understand there's more, maybe even what they can see for themselves, like instilling that sense that, like, I want you to have this, and I want to be your champion. I want to cheerlead for you, because you may not even be thinking about it. And so it's like getting the big gift at Christmas. It's like Jesus has this present for us. It has our giftings in it, our purpose in it, and he's been like, I made this for you before you were born. I've just been waiting for you to open this up. Right. And he's just so excited to give it to you. And so many of us are not looking for that present.
Yeah. We call it, so in our organization, we call those who are in that, you know, we call them dream builders. They're the ones who,
that's great.
You know, we work with, up until this point, as of like last year, June of last year, we'd had hands on 14,000 people. That's the touch point of, we've had some kind of touch point with at least 14,000 people. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
But tightening it really in was where we built Dream Builders. And so we said we want to work with a few, just a handful, but we're going to go in really heavy with them. So we want to create community with them. We want to be connecting with them regularly. We want to go over their finances and their budget and their church, like, and getting them connected in the community. We want to go really intense with them. And the hope is that they will establish a community of people around them, that when they're having those really crappy days and they say just want to quit their job, that they'll have a community of people who are pouring into them, guiding them, advising them. You know, really, just in all honesty, what the actual church is supposed to do.
Yeah.
Provide that for them. So
this is exactly what life. This isn't homeless life. This is just life.
This is just life.
Because when I got into the church for the first time, 2012, I went to my first as an adult church service. And I really didn't want to go, because I had been saved a few months, and my buddy kept asking me to go to church because he knew I was saved. But I was like, no, I got my Bible. That church is just going to ask for my money.
Yep.
I'm a gambling addict. I don't really want to give. I don't have any money to give, even if I had it. And I didn't want to be in that, what I thought that's what the environment was. And when I finally arrived at church for the first time, I had this different experience, you know. But one of the things that I experienced was, like, someone saying, one of the speakers is like, if you're a Christian, you need to serve. You need to, you know, be a part of the church. Don't just be here listening. And I had never done anything for free. What I would have called for free. Never volunteered for anything outside of a job that pays me a paycheck. And so I went to the after service, went to like the info desk at the church, and I was like, hey, they said I should sign up to serve if you're a Christian. So I'm a Christian. I'm here to serve. Like, I'm talking about, even though I'm born again and I'm an adult, I'm ignorant to so many things of the Bible. I've barely passed a few pages so far, and so I'm learning all these things. And it reminds me so much of just what I'm hearing about people in your program or people who you're going to be dealing with. Like, it's just life. It's just taking it step by step. And so when I signed up, and they're like, well, what job do you want to do? Well, I don't know what my gift is at that point. I don't know what God's called me to do. I don't know my purpose.
Yeah.
I don't even know to look for it yet, honestly.
Yeah.
But I was just doing the steps.
Yeah.
Getting my ID, right? I'm just getting my ID.
Yeah.
And
right.
they said, well, I said, which one's the worst one? Because in my head, I'm thinking, I'm going to work my way up. Yeah. And that's really like the thought. I was like, they were like, well, the parking lot's the worst one because you got to go outside in the summertime and wait. I was like, sign me up. It was like, sign me up for that. So I spent months and months and months outside putting the cones out, waving at people, putting the things back in the garage that had no heat, or had no air conditioning. And now I'm on staff at a church, right? Yeah. And that didn't come overnight. And that didn't come. That wasn't my very next step either. Same thing when I went to the radio station, when I started the show that you were on. Yeah. When I got that job, I was hired to press a button twice a week, and within 4 months of being there, favor of God on my life, opened up 4 promotions within 6 months. And all of a sudden I'm hosting I'm the very first person to host a radio show on that airwave in 60 years that they paid to host one. Wow. Everyone else who had ever had a show, they're paid to host that show. And that's the favor of God. And so what I'm seeing is people experiencing favor even in your dream build, which is such a great name too, by the way. Great name. Yeah. Because even without knowing what the dream is, like I can just feel it, like walking in that room. As somebody who's helped build it, helped create it, been in the environments where you've seen people grow to even want that for themselves, it's got to be so rewarding.
It is when you can start to see them see that dream for themselves. Yes. That's often the hardest part, though. Like, just getting them to see that they can dream. I have this this story about this young man that I used to work with years ago. His nickname on the streets was Teardrop. So this kid grew up, and I think I've shared this story with you before. I think I probably shared it on the radio show like a long time ago. Okay. But Teardrop, when I first met him, he was a gangbanger, very into the gang lifestyle. Him and I we were like oil and water. We did not get along at all, but God just kept putting him on my heart all the time. And so as I began to get to know him and connect with him, he started opening up about what his childhood was like. And so this is a young man who has an 8-year-old. Just picture being 8 years old, and you live in a house where you're in the house with your mom, but your mom is literally pimping young girls on the streets and has turned your basement into sex slave basement. Like these young girls were like locked to a pole, and all day long they were like had men coming down and like raping them, and he sees this as like a norm. So he tells me this, he describes this to me, and I would talk to him about like dreaming big. By this time he was like 16, 17 years old, dropped out of high school. And I said, dude, you are such a good leader. People follow you. And you know this. Why not go back to school? Like, why not like try to get a job? And he told me, over a couple different occasions, like, why am I going to do that? Like, everybody in my life is dead before the age of 30. And he said that, and I'm like, whatever. But I go home and I start thinking about it, and I think about everybody that he knows. Yeah, they're all under the age of 30. All of them. And indeed, like, everybody who is in his life does end up dead. Wow. Before then. How do you dream? What do you dream? Sure. If you use the analogy like the grass is greener on the other side, these are kids that we're working with. Like, you can't say that to them. They don't even know what grass looks like.
They've been chained to a pole.
They've been chained to a pole.
You don't know what 1 minute of that's like.
Yeah.
nonetheless a lifetime of it.
They've lived scorched earth life.
Mm-hmm.
So how am I going to like talk to them about dreaming?
Yeah.
Well, it's not always possible. Some of them are never going to see like that they are able to like dream and have dreams of their own. Many of them, the reality is many of them probably won't ever. But doggone it, I'm going to try to get as many of them as I can to dream like the plan and the vision that God has for their life.
Yeah.
And it may just be one, but all right, God, it's like sign me up.
Well, Jesus went after the one.
Yeah.
So I find that it's a commendable thing to do.
Yeah.
Leave the 99 to grab the one.
Right.
And so what you're doing is commendable, man. You're doing a great job with it. And I want to transition from that because the best part of what you're doing is the stories that you can tell me about the successes and all that thing. But behind the scenes, Testimony House, Restoration House, we're getting started around the same time, is your shift recently into sort of the nonprofit space. You started a podcast to help people raise and start their own nonprofits. I've listened to several episodes of that. Great stuff with you and Mary Valloni. And so I want to transition into a conversation about what that's like, because there's been some talk here at Testimony House of us, putting our feet in that water. And it's not necessarily the first time we've put our feet in the water, but I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of questions. And the first one is, when we talk, if you're just a Christian, right? And you hear that somebody's trying to raise money. Like I had the huge, I'm talking about when I said it, a huge issue thinking the church just wanted my money. Mentally, there was just a wall up from the second. Now it got tore down at one point.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because somebody explained it to me the right way. It was a revelation from God, right? And then sometimes that's what it takes to knock those walls down. But for me, as God asked us to possibly pursue this method, my first initial thought, before even praying and asking God if it was him or whatever, was like, there ain't no way I'm begging for money. And to me, that is like clearly not the right heart.
Yeah.
And clearly, but I think for so many people, it is sort of the first step into it. And so you were raising funds basically the whole time, right? Even though you said you had somebody in the beginning who helped get you started, but it's been part of your journey, man.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, what was your heart when you first learned that you were going to have to start sitting across the table from somebody and being like, hey, this is the dream God gave us. Do you mind?
Yeah. I hated it. And I don't want to say like to this day I still can, but I kind of still do. It is, I think you got to be a very special person to just really enjoy like fundraising.
Yeah.
It's tough. It can be tough and it can be really hard. When we got it going years ago, I did have somebody who kind of gave some initial jolt, with a little bit of an infusion, but that infusion dried up very quickly. And so I spent like the first couple years of our organization's life not collecting a salary. And even once we did start having money to come in, I chose to allocate those funds to go towards our other co-founder, Lily Blake, first, because she was really the one running all the programs and everything. And I thought, boy, I can't ask for money if we don't have programs going that are impacting people. So did the first almost 3 years, like collecting no paycheck. The third year and on was bivocational, but was still not collecting a check with it. And then eventually, like 5 years ago, crossed over to doing it full time. And now we have a staff of paid staff of 6 that they're paid to do the work. It is not easy, but early on, I did make one really good decision. So we had a little bit of money. I think it was probably about $800 in the account. And so I said, well, I don't know how to do any of this. I mean, I don't know how to fundraise. I don't know how to build a nonprofit. I don't know how to, establish the structure, the culture, all of it. But I figured the most important thing I need to do is figure out how to get money coming in.
Yeah.
So I brought on a coach, Mary Valloni, who does the podcast with me now, and she was somebody who had a coaching business And what she was doing, I was coaching a lot of missionaries and a lot of people who had organizations already. But I was a rogue in that, like, I was the one that, like, was just getting started. And there was one other who was just getting started too. And she really gave me, like, solid principles to learn how to fundraise so that I could, go into conversations confidently and talk to people about, like, funding us. Now, like, when you're first getting started versus where I'm at now, like, it's two totally different worlds, because when you're first getting started, you're having to pitch, here's what we want to do. And it's really like a proof of concept. Like, you can't guarantee to anybody that the money that they give is going to impact people's lives because it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
And that's like a very scary place to be, right? Like, I want you to give on what I promise you that we're going to do.
But the world does this all the time. Venture capitalists give. Shark Tank. I haven't made this thing yet, but I'm going to make a squeegee thing and it's going to sell 10 million. It's
right.
Like,
Well, and so to that investor, their hope is at least they're going to get a return on their money.
Yes.
What you're selling to people is impact. I can't give you a return on your money, but I can give you impact. So if you want to use your dollars that is going to be, like, beneficial to society, what I'm promising you is impact.
Yeah.
That's what you're selling. Now, like me, now what I can do is I can say, here's what we've done.
Right.
We want to do more. Here's what we've done. We need to be sustainable. So I can go back to those, like we were talking about, like, I can go back to those stories. I can share stories about how we have helped people get from point A to point B. But when you're first getting started, you don't have any of that. You really have to sell, like, here's what we're going to do, and the donors have to be okay with that. It's scary. Like, it's like, oh my gosh, like, yeah.
The idea of going to sit down with somebody and share a vision with Testimony House is not a problem for me. I love talking, clearly. I could talk for hours at a time without any issue. And I read this book called The God Ask, which you guys have talked about on your podcast before. I had never heard of it until like a month ago. I'm hearing about this book for the first time. Apparently it's this book in the space that everybody uses to sort of guide their principles on why they should be okay with fundraising, because there's a lot of spiritual aspects to this book, and then it gets sort of into the principles of the how to and all that.
Yeah.
When one of the things that they ask you to do is create these different things, I forget what you called it a minute ago, but you were showing me that you had like a bifold, like a fold thing that folds
yeah,
up.
we call that a case document.
Okay,
yeah.
A case document. Yeah. So I don't know if that's what they call it in the book, but it's something very similar they call it. And then you got to get your list out of all the people you might reach out to, and and get a script ready to call them, and do all these different types of things to sort of be able to start speaking to people for the first time, share your vision with them. I don't mind sharing the vision. I've never had to share the vision and at the end of the conversation say, that's the vision. Now do you want to pony up here to the table? And I know that's not the language that they want you to use, but for the sake of this conversation, when I'd pump myself up reading this book, Tim, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go. You want to do the God Ask? You want to go get the thing? I'm like, yeah, we get the God Ask. And so I start putting all this stuff together, and I'm talking about, like, I'm telling Megan, we're praying tonight. I'm like, God, we're going to crush it. We're going to nail this thing, And just because I was listening to a lot of the affirming things. I was listening to podcasts. I listened to your show a bunch of times. And so I was just like listening to all the things saying, you can do it. You can do it. You can do it. And I pumped myself up. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And then it says, write down a list of all the people you might reach out to.
Yeah.
And I start this list, and I'm about 5 names in. And I tell Megan, I said, I got to stop.
Yeah.
I felt so sick to my stomach, Tim.
Yeah.
Because as I'm writing these names down, I'm picturing in my head, the first phone call.
How that conversation's going to go.
How it's going to go. How am I ever going to, like putting a name, like the idea of asking for money is not as bad as, like, I'm going to call Tim, and I'm going to be like, Tim, hey, I want you to I want to share my financial goals with you and my ministry vision, and what time do you want to meet?
Yep.
Just having those phone calls in my head. I mean, I started
Yeah.
Things aren't as easy as it seems anymore. And so I ended up finishing it took me a few days to finish the list because I was, it felt overwhelming just to put names on faces on it. But at the same time, I was like, I believe people are going to want to get behind this. I believe that the vision that God's given me isn't for me. And if people hear it, they're going to want to partner with it. So I understand now, like I told you earlier, I don't know if this was off camera or not, but I was like, I don't want to see. I've in the 13 years I've been in ministry, we've never once asked for money. We just do what we do. We make videos when it's time to. It's just a part-time ministry. I'm just doing it when I have the time or when I feel led to do something. And now God sort of shifted that, and it's like I don't. And before God asked me to do it, I was like, it's just begging for money, and that is the totally wrong heart, and I totally know that now. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be super easy. Maybe simple. The fact that you're just sharing a vision and you're asking them to come on part of your team. Yeah. And there might be 100 or 200 people on the end of this who are like, John, I'm so thankful that you called me and that you sat at my kitchen table or met me at Starbucks.
That's right.
To share this vision with me. And so being on that side of it where you're at, where you're sort of like sharing the nuts and bolts of what you've done, and you've got people around you who are like, yeah, we helped with that, versus where I'm at, where I'm about to get like, let me show you the proof of concept, to use your term. Like,
yeah,
like, why haven't you done in 13 years what you're asking me to do now? Well, I haven't promoted, done as much time. So there's like all these things in my head where I'm trying to walk through that. But for somebody who's gone through it, when you made that first phone call, did you have the same nervousness, the same like, oh God, I gotta actually do this?
Yep, I absolutely did. I like, and full transparency, still feel that way sometimes. Yeah. I like, there are people who I'm meeting with currently. I'm actively in engaging conversations right now where I know where I want that to go. I know I want them to be a big financial contributor because I know what they're capable of being financially. And I still shake in my boots sometimes, like, yeah. And ultimately it goes back to just a confidence thing, and when I say confidence, like, do I really believe that what we do works? Because if I sit and I think about it for a second, you're darn right I believe in what we're doing. Yes, it works. Yes, God is in it. Yes, we're changing people's lives. Yes, we're going to continue to change more people's lives. And then when I reset to that, like, okay, yeah, I can do this. This conversation is nothing, because the truth is there's nothing that I can do. I can go into that conversation shaking in my boots. But if God is in it, it will happen.
Yeah.
Or God will use that person to connect me to somebody who, can, be like a supporter. The times in my life where I've done things that God is leading me to do, and I've felt nervous and shaking in my boots, I've had to humble myself to realize there's nothing that I can do to talk to that person that is going to make them move a single needle in their life. It is only God who is going to either prompt him to say yes or no. So really all I have to do, my responsibility in this, is to be the one to present the opportunity.
Right.
And let God take it from there. Because I can't come up with this perfect speech.
Sure.
That's just gonna be like, say everything just right,
From
and
the
then
movies,
and they're gonna jot a check for like $50,000.
Yeah.
It's only whether God is in it. If I'm speaking truth and speaking confidently in what we are capable of doing, and leaving it at that, and then giving them the opportunity to be a part of that, maybe something will happen.
Yeah.
Now, as you and I talked off camera too, I stress, now I don't typically just ask for money. I ask for an opportunity. When I share with what we do and I present what we do and how they can get involved, I'm asking them for advice on how to push that needle. We say a lot in our coaching programs, you ask for money, you'll get advice. If you ask for advice, you'll get money. And that's not I didn't come up with that. Mary didn't come up with that. She heard that from somebody, but it's really good advice. If you go in there asking for money, they're going to be like, ew, ew, And I've done that before. I went into a conversation with somebody who I know who has got a lot of money, and they'd given to our organization previously. So I thought, oh, well, they gave this last time. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to ask them to double it, because I felt like they had the capability.
That's chapter 28 of the God Ask. Tim, you're doing what you're supposed to do.
I went into that just thinking, man, this is going to work. And I said, I know last year that you gave this amount. Would you be willing to give this year? And they just sat back. They're like, oh, well, we actually only intended to give you that one gift, as a one-time gift. We don't have the capability to do that like over and over again. And he kind of like awkwardly said, let alone like double that. And I just remember walking away from that conversation like, Tim, you idiot. You came into that conversation so arrogantly, thinking like, I know what this person has the capability of doing, so I'm going to go for it. Not like just trusting God and sharing with them the need that we have and what we're doing, and letting God do the rest on that. I just kind of arrogantly like assumed that they had the capability of doing that massive gift. And it's only by the grace of God that they continue to have a conversation with me to this day. Because if that was me, if I were them, I would have never given myself another shot. Like, bro,
Yeah.
we wrote you a big old check last year. Is that not good enough for you?
Yeah.
Now you're coming back to the well and asking us to double that? It was super arrogant on my part. And I had to eat a big old slice of humble pie. And the problem was that, yeah, I was confident in that, which you need to be, but I was arrogant, like just assuming that they could do it, and they couldn't.
That's an interesting thought, because for me, who has not been doing it, so I've only been trying to gain wisdom listening to people who have been doing it. I would have told you prior to that meeting, yeah, I think it's totally normal to go and ask someone to increase their giving if it's been some time, whether it's a year or 2 or 3 years. Based on what I'm hearing, it's okay to go and ask them. But what you're saying is like, yeah, it's fine to ask them. Make sure your heart's right.
Exactly.
Make sure you're prayed up. Make sure you present the need versus the desire of the finances.
Go big.
Yeah.
Like, don't put a cap on what God has the capability of doing. But do not go into that conversation just assuming that they're going to do it, because they have done that before. Because you don't know what kind of like sacrifices that person might have had to make to do that if they were like previously like giving to you, But you come in with confidence, knowing that you've done your homework, but leave the arrogance at the table.
Yeah. Here's a question I have, because I know many people that I've met over the years who run ministries, who sat across me at the radio station or the podcast and share that they've had to raise support, whether it's for their missionary trip or whatever it is. And I have yet to meet the person, maybe other than you, who said, yeah, we did it. Like we got to where we were aiming. I've seen people raise a few $1,000s of support so they can go to Peru and do different things. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about trying to grow something that becomes, national. Would be my big dream, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And being able to grow something that can impact every state, not just St. Louis. But when I run into people who have done these sorts of things, it's to various success. And one of the things I see over and over again that I want to ask your opinion about, because you've been in these circles a lot longer than me, is that I seem to see so many people consumed with money. Not like the greed of it, but it's just like, we don't have enough. I don't have enough. I got to get some more. If this check doesn't come in, it's never going to work out. And it's like, when I see that from the outside, I'm like, I'm glad I don't ask for money, because like I can focus on who am I going to book tomorrow? What video am I going to make next week? What testimonial do I want? Like, I am focused on the thing that I want to be doing ultimately, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, you don't want to be fundraising. You want to be out on the streets, and you want to be helping create programs that help people in those spaces. But when you're called to found a ministry and God's called you to raise support, raising support becomes a full-time job.
Somebody's got to do it.
So how how have you seen, is there people out there who are not consumed like that, or is that just like par for the course?
I think it's a part of the job. When, if you're the CEO of a big company, for-profit company, ultimately, like, they're thinking about the numbers too. If you're not making money, then you don't have a product. You can't make the product. And so ultimately, the CEO or executive director of a nonprofit, they have to be thinking about that as well. It's a big, massive chunk of the job. And you have to be okay with that. It can be all consuming for sure. And if you allow it to, it will consume every minute of your day. There have been times where, like, I'm sitting up in my bed at 12:45 in the morning because I haven't been able to get out of my mind, like, how we're going to cover the cost of this project, or we just hire on a new staff member, like, how do we ensure longevity, that we can keep that person on for more than like 6 months or 9 months. Like, how can we ensure that we're going to keep them on for many years? It's not really something that ever goes out of your mind. And ironically, recently I have been given that a lot of thought. So I've felt over the last few months that most of my life is centered around money, not just the nonprofit. So I think about my own personal life, the coaching business that we do, the nonprofit, our kids and all the sports that they play. Everything is centered around money. And I am not a money-driven person. So I've never been driven by finances. I've never been driven to be like rich or wealthy. There are those who work to live and then live to work. And then I work to live.
Yeah.
I work so that I have enough ends meet on the table, and then I'm good. Whereas other people live to work and they're motivated by power and wealth and all that. And that's great. God can use that as well. But I've never been that. So to be consumed by money in the way that I feel like I am sometimes, it is anxiety ridden for me. I don't do well when I'm just focused on the money. And so where God has had me recently, he won't get me out of Matthew 6. In Matthew 5 and chapter 5 and chapter 6, when Jesus is doing the Sermon on the Mount, and he's talking about, like, stop worrying. Don't let worry consume you. Like, that is not what I have, the plans that I have for you. Don't be anxious about stuff. So whenever these last few months, when I do find myself getting consumed thinking about the finances in all the areas of my life, he just sits me down and he says, read Matthew 6. And then read it again, and then again, and then again. Because if you're feeling anxious about something, that's not coming from me. That's what God said. It's not coming from me. And then the question that I have felt God ask me recently, and I've been sharing with some of my coaching clients too, is, has there ever been a singular incident in your life where God has not been faithful? I mean, can you name one? And I'm asking myself that, and I'm like, there isn't a single one that I can think of where God has not been faithful to me. He's been so much more faithful to me than I ever have been to him. And he is not only that, but he's going to continue to remain faithful to me no matter what. And so when I have those moments like, oh man, I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know. We want to launch all these new programs. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I do know one thing. If God is in it, he's going to remain faithful. So that takes all that stress. Every thought about having a conversation with somebody, asking them, knowing, I'm hoping that they can write a check for $25,000. How am I going to go into that? I'll tell you exactly how I'm going to go into that. Confident and knowing that if God is in it, he's always been faithful. So all I got to do is just present the opportunity.
Yeah. I've heard so many testimonies over the years of so many moments where people were at the last moment and God shows up. In my own life, moments away from suicide, and I cry out to him, and he answers me, and I give my life to the Lord that night, and I'm on a new trajectory ever since, right? So I know those miracle moments, when God shows up, he shows himself faithful, as you're saying.
Well, can I share an example of that too? So you just mentioned like being in that last moment, like you just don't know where you're going to go next. So years ago, when we were early in our nonprofit, we had to make some leadership decisions that I had to ask somebody to step away from our leadership, that I knew the moment that decision was made was going to affect us financially. And so, but I understood that more than anything, the most important thing was this person had to be removed. So I go into that conversation and I ask that person, I think it's best that you step away. And to my surprise, they actually agreed. And they said, yes. That in and of itself was a miracle enough, because I didn't think that they were going to, I had so many issues with this person. But my youngest son had the foresight to pray over me one night when I'm like in tears, saying like, I need this person to leave the organization, but I don't think they would do it. And he walks me outside and he puts his hand on my shoulder. My 9-year-old son puts his hand on my shoulder and he said, let's ask God to do this. And so I'm like, again, I'm fighting this kid. Like, he's not going to do it, son. Like, I've been trying for months. He's not going to do it. And he's like, Dad, let's pray.
Yeah.
So he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, Jesus, we need you to intervene right now. A 9-year-old saying this. We need you to intervene. We need you to have this person answer their phone right now in Jesus' name. So I'm like, amen. And like, I'm looking at my son now, like, now what next? And he's like, call him. Again, that arrogance comes out of me. Son, he's not going to. Dad, call him. Fine. He answers the phone. And I've been trying to get a hold of him for like over a month. Answers the phone, and Caleb's looking at me, and he's like, Dad, do it now. So I said, I think what would you say if I think it's best that you step away from the organization? He said, I think that's best. I'm like, what? Excuse me. Huh? And so Caleb again looks at me like, get it done. Wow. So I had to get the board on the phone in that moment and make it official. And the very next phone call I had to make was to Lily Blake, who by that point she was the only paid staff member. And she's also our other co-founder. I said, Lily, this is what's happened. And she was like, that's amazing. It's what we've been like looking for, what we wanted. And I said, but the problem is I know that by doing this, we just lost a lot of like funding. And then I said, Lily, I don't know where that funding is going to come from. So I said, we've got about 3 months. We have about a 3-month runway where I can cover your salary. And after that, I don't know where it's going to come from. So she said in that moment, Tim, we're just going to pray about it, and we're just going to trust that God is going to provide. So
it's great to have people around you like that. Your son, like,
well, because I was a wimp back then. Like I was ready to throw in the towel, and these two had the foresight to know, because I was not leading in like God's, like I was defeated at this point. I was ready to just call it quits, and they were the ones who like led me through, and my wife. But so I told her, we have a 3-month runway, and I don't know where the money's going to come. So 1 month goes by and it hasn't changed. 2 months goes by and we still don't have a plan. That 3rd month, she knew we were down to 1 paycheck. Like, I can cover your next paycheck, and I don't know where it's going to come after that. We got down to that 1 check, but all along the way, once I had been corrected by Lily and my son, I operated in that faith. I don't know where it's going to come, but God, you've always remained faithful to me. I trust that there is a plan. So the 3 months goes by. We're down to the last paycheck. I give out that last paycheck, not knowing where it's going to come. Sure enough, money starts to come in, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more. And from a financial standpoint, we have never, our organization, this is like 7 years ago, we have never been that, we've never looked anywhere but up beyond that from a financial standpoint. God has always continued to bless a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. But it took us going down to that last paycheck for her. Mm-hmm. And I know that that was a part of God's plan. I know that he wanted us to feel that and trust in it and remain faithful to him in that time. Because had he done it any other kind of way, we wouldn't have learned the valuable lessons. Trust me.
Yeah.
I've got you. I've got this. I'm faithful.
So good. It's one of the greatest lessons you can learn is to trust God.
Yeah.
It's not an easy lesson to trust God because it's simple to say, well, just trust God. Just trust God. We're going to pray right now. Lord Jesus, heal him. And you just go on your day, right? And then the person's not healed, and you're like, well, we're just trusting God, you know, like.
Yeah.
But then there are things like you're saying, like, I got to trust God, or this woman doesn't get a paycheck from us, like, because I can't figure this out.
Can't put food on the table.
That's right. And so one of the greatest lessons of trust I ever learned was when God had asked me to leave my job at the casino. I'm saved 8 months or something at this point, 6 months. And at the very first church service I went to that I talked about earlier, the pastor said, if you're a Christian, God's got a plan for your life. You need to go figure out what it is, and you pray and ask him what it is. And at that point, I had never prayed for anything besides food my whole life. So I finally started saying, okay, God, what's your vision for my life? And I got persistent. I'm just tapping on his shoulder every day. What is it? 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 You know, and I'm like, what's my vision? Lord, you got it for me. I want it. I want it. I want it. And then he finally showed up 6 months later. A lot of story behind how it happened, but he said, you're going to start a ministry called Testimony House Christian Learning Center. You're going to have to quit your job. I'm like, quit my job. I was working at the casino, which was where I was in active addiction, right? I am saved. I'm convicted of my sin for the first point, but I hadn't stopped gambling yet.
Yeah.
I was on my way. I would actually stop a month later, and I would never look back. And I'm making about $100,000 dealing cards 10 years ago. Good money then, great money.
That's pretty good money.
So I was like, why would you have me leave this lucrative thing where I am sharing the gospel with all these unsaved people? Like, I've got all these reasons why I can't do it, right? But through miraculous circumstances, I ended up quitting my job. And when I quit my job, they gave, I cashed out like a small 401k that I had maybe a few $1,000s in it. I was like, well, once I quit and once this money's gone, similar to you, like, God's going to have to show up at the end of this. And so I'm not worried about it. Like, God's going to have another job for me around the corner after this money rolls out. And so the money starts to dwindle. And I'm like, all right, Lord, where you at? Where you at? And he goes, and this is the lesson that I learned. He said, I don't want you to ask anybody else for any money. Which was interesting because from my perspective as a gambling, addict, my life had become incredibly reliant upon the gifts of other people because I was constantly misspending my money.
Yeah.
So I'd go to my mom, my friends, my coworkers. I had no problem, especially if I was at the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Asking somebody, hey, can you give me $50? Hey, can you give me $300? Yeah. Hey, I can't pay my rent this month. Can you cover me? I'll pay you back. And so I have 12 payday loans out across the country. I had filed bankruptcy once already. Like, asking people for money was not one of my issues.
Yeah. You were actually used to it.
Very used to it. And so when God was like, don't ask anybody for it, trust me. I was like, oh, that's different. Like, this is different. So we were 100.
I wonder if that's why you have a weird feeling about it now.
Interesting. Could be. Yeah. It's not about asking for it. It's just like relying on God to provide it. Yes.
Yeah.
So when I was down to my the car note that I had was due. It was due today. And I didn't have the money in my bank account. And so I sat in my bed and I'd gone 100 days and I hadn't asked anybody for money. And I could have. It was only $200. So I could have easily gotten $200 from somebody. It wasn't this like monumental amount of money.
Yeah.
And I woke up that morning and I said, God, I don't know where you're at. but I guess I'll just sell that car and I'll just go walk to where you want me to go, because I'm not going to let this car be the end of what journey you have for me to go on. I'm just going to trust you and whatever you're doing. And I think I finally, in my heart, submitted to like whatever his plan was, instead of relying on the money in the account or the help of other people to get me to where I needed to go. Like I really needed to put all of my walk into him. And I heard the voice of the Lord say, check the mailbox. Now the story is that we had broken the mailbox, the key, like a week earlier, and we hadn't been getting our mail, and they were supposed to fix the lock and hadn't done it. And that night they had delivered the key. So that morning I go, there's just piles and piles of mail in this little mailbox from our apartment, and I'm looking through it, and there's a letter addressed to me. Now I've never asked for any money for Testimony House, not one time.
Yeah.
And there was a letter in there, and the letter said, hey, we sold some furniture. We heard you started Testimony House. And it was like $300 covers that. And I was like, holy moly, like this is neat, And then we go, and so that experience, my faith like grew.
Yeah.
A month later, there's another letter in the mailbox. It's from somebody who was from my poker world that I had never met. Someone who I used to work with told my story of me leaving the casino to go do this ministry. And someone at the table heard my story and was convicted by God to give me the winnings from their poker tournament.
Wow.
So they sent me a check, got the picture of it on the wall here at the studio, of like that got us nonprofit status, funded me for a year. Like I went 18 months without a paycheck, Tim. 18 months. And a lot of that was relying on things like that to happen. The generosity of other. I was living with a friend rent free. Like, so there was moments where, but the entire time God was teaching me how to trust him. Like, I have you somewhere down the road that you can't see, even though I've told you what it is and I've called it something. You don't know exactly what it looks like. You don't know that in 10 years I'm going to ask you to start raising support, even though you never have. Like, you don't know all these things. I've got a wife coming. You got 5 kids. Like, he knows all these things long before I do. And if I had asked somebody for that money, and I'd short-circuited the faith and the trust that I needed to put in him and so you've done it, I've done it, we've heard other people do it, but when are people going to do it for themselves? Because man, there ain't no better story than like when you say, oh man, God did it. It wasn't me, it wasn't you.
I have no explanation for this. I cannot compute how we actually did it, but God did it.
Sold furniture. I felt like God wanted me to give you my furniture money. That is like, you can't make that stuff up. I couldn't have wrote that in a script. It's not even good enough.
Yeah, I had a years ago when I was transitioning from that youth pastor role, and I was in that wilderness period where I was trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do. I was married. We had a 2-year-old in the house. We had a mortgage. I just had to leave my job, and was kicked out of the church pretty much. No income, didn't know like where like we were gonna like cover all of our bills. Months go by, and we got behind on our mortgage. About 6 months before all that started, I'm a veteran, and had a conversation with a buddy of mine who was a disabled veteran. And I was talking about some of the issues that I've had being in my post-military life. And he said, you should go talk to the VA. And so I go talk to the VA. And honestly, like, I just went to a couple appointments and just thought, okay, nothing's ever going to happen, and I just discarded it, right? But when I went to those appointments was right at that period in my life where I left that youth pastor role, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. I couldn't get a job anywhere, so I couldn't cover our bills. Well, 6 months in, I still don't have a solution. 9 months in, don't have a solution. And it got to the point where we were 1 month away from being foreclosed on in our house, and I did not know. We were about $9,000 behind on our mortgage, and again, got down to that one. They're sending us letters. You have 1 more month to figure this out. But we remained faithful during that time. Like, something's going to happen. We're not sure. God, you're going to have to show up. But regardless, even if you don't show up, God, even if you don't fix this, we're still going to remain faithful, because it doesn't change that you're faithful no matter what. That last month comes by. I get a letter in the mail from the VA, and they said, we have evaluated your medical conditions or whatever, and we've determined that you're going to be eligible for 50% disability through the VA. I'm reading that letter. I'm like, cool. So I can go to a doctor, basically. And when I read a little bit further, it says, we're going to give you you qualify for financial disability as well. So that means that you get 50% of what you got while you were in the military for the rest of your life. And I'm like, wow. So I read a little bit more. I'm like, so I get like $1,000 a month, cool. Read a little bit more. We're going to back pay this, though, to the date that you applied 1 year ago. And wouldn't you know, the amount that was the back pay was the amount that we owed on our mortgage.
Yeah. Well, he can't make this stuff up.
And it wasn't like God could, it wasn't like he gave us, we hit the jackpot, and we're rich.
Never is. Yeah.
But it also wasn't that it was anything less than what we needed. It was exactly what we needed.
It goes to what you were saying about Matthew 6 and the worry.
Yeah.
If only we could get to stop worrying a little sooner. How much sooner might the back pay show up, or how much sooner might...
That's right. Well, and Jesus says, how many of you, by being anxious, can add 1 single second to your life?
Right.
We can't.
Right.
So we need to stop.
Yeah.
And just trust. Because whether he wrote that check for that back pay or not, or any of the oodles of examples that I can think of in my life, if he had not done those things, is he still faithful?
Mm-hmm,
yep,
mm-hmm.
he is. And I'm just going to sit and remain in that.
It's a good place to end it, man. Tim, you've been great, man. Your stories have encouraged me. Let people know how to find your podcast.
Yeah, so if you want to listen to our podcast, it's called the Start and Grow Your Nonprofit Podcast. You can find it on iTunes and Spotify, all the major podcast channels. Just Start and Grow Your Nonprofit.
Awesome. And restorationhouse.org?
Yep, Restoration House, restorationhousestl.org.
STL.org. So thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate you very much. I'm going to have all the links in the description of this video. And until next time, guys, we pray you discover a future and a hope for your life today.
We ain't trying to blend in. If you're ready, come on with us, my friends. Come on. We can change the world. Hey, we can change the world. Let's go.
What changes the world? The only thing that ever really changes the world is when somebody gets the idea that love can abound and can be shared